Podcast. I'm looking forward to having this chat, and it's been a long time coming, really, because I'd say it was around this time last year I received a message from yourself on LinkedIn saying that you were enjoying the podcast. It potentially might have been after I had done the pod with Billy O'Regan, who you have been a guest on his podcast as well. So thanks for that feedback, because it can be quite difficult to get feedback. It doesn't happen all too often, and any feedback that we get is great. So I'm glad somebody's listening and somebody's enjoying it. But how are you today, and what have you been up to so far?
Thanks. Definitely. I think it might have been after listening to Billy O'Regan on it. Maybe I might have listened to that. He's always good entertainment. So I think that might have been a good one. But same as everybody over COVID, lots of time to be listening to podcasts and hear about training. So probably where it came across. So good stuff. I'm excellent. Yeah, very good. Just a bit of a downtime here in the middle of the day, kind of the way the schedule looks at the moment, with being back home and coaching. Bit of coaching in the morning, bit of coaching in the evening. So time to do things like this and catch up on some other stuff. So all good. Trained the under 16 and under 17 boys hurling and football S&C for summer up in Bishopstown this morning. So good morning so far.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of coaching. So are you enjoying the hands-on approach? But I would imagine you have a lot of managerial duties as well in your new role with Bishopstown and Setanta and the little, well, I was going to say a little facility, but the big facility you have down there.
Geez, definitely a massive combination. In regards to the role itself, there's multiple parts of it. I work for Setanta College and for Setanta Wellness, and I'm placed within Bishopstown GAA Club then, where we'll say coincidentally where I'm from and was born and raised. So there's a massive part of coaching teams that goes along with that for sure, and that's we're coaching everything from under 12 boys and girls through adult men and women. So it's just under 400 players, I think. So I do a fair amount of the coaching across those teams, but also, we do have excellent support from the Setanta project, and that we have coaches from within the organization that come in for a number of hours a week. So, scheduling and managing that and introducing them to the club coaches, dealing with the club committees, dealing with every camogie, LGFA, hurling, football, they're all minds onto their own at different times. So definitely lots going on. And I suppose that's 50% of the role technically. And then there's the other side of the Setanta element, which is we operate commercially as well, on site, and we host our own college courses on Saturday mornings. So making sure we're good to go on that. Trying to drive up a bit of business on the commercial end for, we've a number of PTs working in the commercial side in the club during certain hours. So, a bit on that, and then a bit on doing a bit of stuff, things like this, delving into the world of writing articles and stuff like that for Setanta. So that's a new one for me, really. And so a couple of things there. So we could talk about hundreds of different things. And
we will.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot. There's a lot, different clinics and stuff that we have run through Setanta for coaches that can come in. We've had 2 or 3 youth athletic development clinics for people just coach education. We got to host the Irish S&C Network conference, the first one there, and there was obviously a lot of organising went into that. And fair play to the lads, they took care of the majority of that. But I guess being on site, you get roped into a couple more things.
Well, the articles have been good. I've been enjoying them, to be honest. So if that's a new venture for you, then you're doing pretty well. But I was just about to say, in your previous roles, you've worked with so many teams and so many individuals. Has it become a little easier, do you reckon, to learn 400 names in a couple of months?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good with names. I'm okay with that. I can definitely get that once I'm around them very quickly, and that's no problem for me whatsoever. I think that's not on purpose, just always the way, maybe the way it's always has been. Jesus, there's definitely benefited from having the experience in the States of multiple teams, multiple different personalities, multiple coaches, all those things. I suppose one of the massive differences I'm finding is it's a community volunteer organization. So I'm not necessarily dealing with professional players or scholarship players or professional coaches. Not that they're any better or worse, to be honest, but just they actually have a 9-to-5 job. So if I send them a message at 12 o'clock in the day and get annoyed that they're not getting back to me quick enough, I have to kind of calm down a bit and realize,
he's under a sink somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Our minor hurling coach is a painter, so he's probably actually doing real work, not S&C with the under 15s at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like, I would imagine there have been a number of differences in the new role working with predominantly GAA athletes and then your previous roles over in the States. But like, I would be interested to ask you, what are the major differences in regards to the athletes' attitudes towards training, if there are any? Because from working in the GAA myself, they're so committed to the sport because it is their outlet away from the job, as you just said. Whereas sometimes when you're working with those athletes that are maybe going more towards the top, the elite level standard, they don't actually realize how lucky they are because they're not spending time under a sink or on top of a house or on the side of one painting it, as you just said.
Yeah. The GAA is just an anomaly in the world, which is obviously look, I spent my whole life involved in it for the first 20 years, so obviously drawn back to it. I think big differences are probably in the GAA players, like that them actually realizing maybe how much, and not in regards how much more they can do, but how much better they can do certain things that they're even older fellas in their mid-20s, 30s and onwards. There's probably loads of room for development still in everything from strength and power, conditioning, nutrition, psychology, although like every performance factor. I think it's more, the realization of like the differences and just tweaks and things they can add in that can really make a difference to like their performance. Now, again, if they're not an inter-county player and they're just a club player and they're, some fellas are happy with their 2 nights a week in a training or 3 nights a week in a training. So that's the balance. I think I'm not trying to install a US American model. I'm obviously trying to take things I've learned and fit them in and, bring some certain things. But the organization and like the structure of training and the delivery of like, say, like a team gym session or a really good team pitch session in regard to S&C, I think the level of detail and the level of demand on that was probably a shock to some of the club players, because any senior club players are probably, they get their gym if they can, 1 or 2, but like there's a massive difference between that and going into the old club gym where there's a couple of racks, couple of boys, bit of crack, or coming into a 35-person organized coach team training. And I suppose that's one of my soapboxes with everybody in the GAA at all levels, is that we need to get away from this sending out programs, do it on your app, do this, and get as much resource into coaching sessions as much as possible, So I think that was probably new to a lot of fellas, like, well, you're going to be there at 7 and we're going to do 7 to half 7 before you go out on the pitch, for your hour hurling or football. So it's an add-on, a bit more stress on them. And I think they just the older men and women just need to decide, I suppose, what level they want to play at. Because I think if you're looking at playing, you're Dublin and they're like, obviously senior club up there is unbelievably high standard, there's a high demand to play at that level. But I think the beauty of this project and the GAA is that might not be for everybody, but you have intermediate, you junior A, you junior B, your junior C, and you can still help them physically with a bit of less demand probably. The underage, the youth teams is really refreshing because they know no different And even after we're 5 months in, so it's week 24. I know the weeks because the schedule is laid out
exactly.
It's like S&C week 24. So the 6 month point is in 2 weeks. So there'll be a big review, kind of, we'll review as we go, but there'll be a bigger review there. But I can even see now, like, we just started our summer S&C schedule with the underage teams. They think nothing of coming up on a Monday, Wednesday morning in the summer at 15 years old and getting 2 full coached S&C sessions. They just think like, this is part of what we do. Our under 16, 17 boys, they train before training every Monday, Wednesday evening all year. They just don't know any different, and that's really, really refreshing, because they won't know any different for the rest of their life. So there won't be a fight about commitment, or it's just, this is part of it,
Yeah, and they're so moldable, as you just said. Like, they pick up on things so much more quickly, like in that when you give them cues or when you give them a focus for the session and you ream it back off to them, what is the focus for the session, there'll always be one lad in the group that will reel off all 3 straight back to you immediately. It's like, Jesus, it's nice to be listened to sometimes, like, rather than, but at the same time, sometimes with the older groups, like, they haven't been seeing each other at school all day. Like, this is their time to come in and see the lads. So it's a fine balance to achieve that kind of bit of crack and the hard work. But I think that you can still have the crack and work pretty hard. Like, and I think, as you just said there yourself, it's mainly the details that might be the little bit of a struggle or a little bit of pushback initially. It's like, as you just said there, and I'm sure from the American standpoint, if you say, right, lads, it's at 7 p.m., that means it's at 7 p.m. So you better be there 5 to 7. Whereas in the GAA and in Ireland in general, it's at 7 p.m. Could be anywhere to 7:15, lads are still showing up. But they're pretty receptive as well, in my estimation anyway, so far. The vast majority, like, they want to improve and they want to buy in and they want to learn and they want to make use of the resources that are now available to them, which is yourself as a coach and your coaching team, as well as the new facility down there. So sounds like you're achieving a great buy-in with them, and it's been relatively easy.
In fair, like, the people within the club are a great bunch of people, both administration, committee people, they're all good people, like local people, a lot of parents, a lot of kids, like, so it's a really nice environment, I suppose. I wouldn't say easy. I think there's a lot that goes into it and keeping it on track. Because I can see very quickly how you could lose the momentum. Like, so I was very conscious at the beginning, myself and other people involved in the project from Setanta and the club, like your likes of Brian Cuppert and Mark Kilgannon from Bishopstown, Des Ryan from Setanta, a few more. Like, we spoke about very early on, we don't actually want to throw the kitchen sink at everybody in the first few weeks. And like, we actually probably have more that we can put in place already, but I'm holding it back. And because there's so much that needs to get put in, like everything from video analysis to nutrition to psychology to strength and conditioning to coach sessions to homework for kids, like at home programs, running programs for coaches, like coaching the coaches. And it's really like, it's like a drip feed model that we're doing. So like we started we are moving very, very slowly. It might seem like to some people that it's not, that there's all this new stuff, but like every week I get asked for certain things by different coaches, or, and I actually have to hold back on it. And I keep reiterating, like, look, I don't want to put that in yet. I think running programs is a really good one with the underage teams, because like we started doing 15, 20, 30-minute athletic development sessions with the kids before training in the winter, in January, February, and then we added duration and we added sessions. Now the summer we've kind of moved into separate sessions because they have more time. So it's a bit more demand on them when there's not a demand to school. And so like we'll do some good running in that, some speed tech and sprint development, bit of conditioning here and there. There's a massive enthusiasm, as you probably know as well, from underage coaches for running programs, conditioning. We want to do, and just want to, like, we got to a point about 4 months in where I was like, okay, like I'm going to give the running that they could do a bit more at training where the coaches deliver it. And then I was seeing the game schedules through the county board, like, and there's 4 or 5 games, and I have to keep holding back in it. And it's just think that's just one example. The other thing is things like nutrition. We've had 1 or 2, like we've Niall Houston from Setanta, who's performance nutritionist. He's excellent, and he'll come in and he'll do stuff, and he's willing to do even more and more stuff, but you're nearly holding it back because you want something new to add in as you go. So then when we get into the back 6 months, and then year 2 and year 3 and year 4, there's new things, there's add-ons, and slowly they build, that's massive, I think, because I think and you've definitely seen this as well, the traditional model in the community game in any sport is 8 weeks of preseason. You do you bring your S&C in, the nutritionist comes in and talks, the psychologist comes in and talks, everyone's well-intentioned. You start off with 50 players, men or women. Then by the time you get to June and championships in July or August, you're down to 25. There's no sign of the nutritionist. There's no sign of the psychologist. So, being very careful. This isn't a year plan. This is under 12s is the earliest age. So the 2010s, the team that are born in 2010 are under 12 this year. So that's the that's the youngest age that we hands-on coach weekly, like 1 or 2 sessions a week. So they'll be adults in the current GAA system when they're under 18. So hopefully when they come out of under 17, I'd hope at that point, so 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, that's 6 years in the program from 12 to 17. 6 years down the line from now, if we're still around 2028, I'd hope to be looking at those fellas and saying, like, they have everything. They're going to be going off to college and doing their leaving cert, but they've come through this very, very detailed curriculum. And it's hard to keep reiterating that point because people want to win under 12 counties, like, which we don't, and then
which is a good thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a massive fan of the competitiveness of it. I think, we've gone a bit too far on one side of, I said this at the conference, like, it has to be fun. It has to be fun. I was like, it's okay to work hard too. Like,
that's where the fun is. Like,
yeah.
Well, probably for us more so because we're from that biased strength and conditioning background. Like, just love hardship, as people know, hearing the schedules, etc. Misery is what we're looking for. But like, it sounds like you're just building blocks, as you said there, and you're mastering one thing before you move on to the next thing. And as you said, some of the coaches can want everything thrown at straight away, and it's like, well, look, let's just throw this into our process, make sure this is delivered well and is functioning quite quickly, I suppose, so we can handle it and we can optimize how we're using whatever sports tech or whatever process we're throwing in, be that like a 10 to 15 minutes analysis session, as you just said there, or like even if the use of GPS for the players, or like it mightn't even be that far. It might be just like a simple monitoring tool of 4 questions, or it might be as simple as getting in and getting your prehab done for 5 to 10 minutes before you get into the session. Like, it comes the whole way down to warm up, and it actually even starts at what time are we getting to the session at, and if there's actual session plan. And there has been an attitude in the GAA for many, many years, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing either. Like, it's just the way it has been, is that we turn up and we do our session, and the head coach has the session in his head, and we'll go off of that. And that session is based off the performance last week. Yeah. And if we do it that way, unfortunately, we're very reactive to what we need to work on, I suppose, but we don't actually get to work on the whole aspect of athletic development or the whole aspect of the game. Whereas that is the benefit for clubs of having a strength and conditioning coach or somebody that's head of their athletic development, is there is a holistic plan for not just a year, as you just said, but for year on year on year on year going down the line, so that we can hopefully win a few championships in 4 or 5 years.
Exactly. And it's just big picture, slow cooking, all those things that, and I think, you do see some immediate improvements in athleticism, even with kids or with the adults. If, I think it's it's a strange position because, you know, there was also 2 years of COVID previously where obviously for every club or team, you know, the amount being done was way less anyway, just because of restrictions. So you're coming in at an ebb that's low for a number of reasons. And then in our own situation in regards to the club, not overly high up the ranks at an adult level at the moment, whereas had been quite competitive 10, 20 years ago. So, you know, there's good scope there that this adds on a lot and that this can really help, you know. So, you know, it could be if you went into the All Blacks after winning the World Cup and you're like, well, where do I go from here? Either I win the World Cup or I failed, you know what I mean? Whereas if you're coming in at a lot of things are new, the overall performance hasn't been massively successful in the last 5, 6, 7 years. You know, there's a pressure wise, if you want to look at pressure, because there's pressure, but it's a bit different, you know. So lots to do. And I think it's been, you know, the fact that like Setanta Wellness operates commercially, that allows an outlet for the parents to also look at training commercially, like through PT and just health classes. And like there's a woman in the club, Louise, who runs the GAA Healthy Club initiative. So you can kind of feed into that. And, you know, while at the end of the day, yes, we're looking for on-field performance down the line here, it does allow the coaches, the parents, people who aren't necessarily training for performance to have access to training, and that can mirror in nicely with, you know, whatever GAA Healthy Clubs and no smoking environments and just all these different things. So it's, you know, it's quite a busy hub for the community already. Like, geez, like if you go up there on a Saturday morning from 9 throughout the day, like it's jammed through different things and initiatives. And, you know, I think hopefully it just keeps growing like that. Because that all feeds into, you know, when our current 20-year-olds retire in 40 years, hopefully they keep training and coaching, and, you know, it just goes from there. They'll be the future coaches in the club, so they'll value the S&C and the nutrition and the psychology, and it all just keeps going. The key is going to be keeping it going for 25, 30, 40, 45 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like a real strong kind of community aspect to the whole project. And you've spoken before about it being a passion project for yourself.
Yeah.
Does that, and the like history you have, I was about to ask you, you were saying you were going well 10, 20 years ago. How many people have asked you to put on the boots yet for the intermediates? I'd say there's been a fair few. But do you ever find yourself like a little bit more emotionally fatigued post work or post games than you had been over in the States because you're so emotionally invested in the whole project?
I suppose I think I haven't hit the emotionally fatigued part yet, because there was new, but yeah, definitely your brain is probably switched onto it a lot of the time. If it's ever off, you're always like, you're thinking about everything from how the under 12s did in their S&C session to the senior league game at the weekend. You know, and luckily I get to spend a fair amount of time out on the pitch and do a small bit of coaching as well in regards to the games themselves, which I'm quite passionate about trying to get back into. I suppose that's my volunteer time, you know, with the club. That's a kind of away from the job. So when I'm off, I'm somehow still up there potentially doing a bit in regards, you know, a bit of hurling and football. So yeah, I would say you're switched onto it. Like, but again, if you'd asked me when I started out in coaching or when I was 14 or 15, like this, I'd have a job in the GAA club, where whatever way that's factored in, like, is a very lucky position to be in, you know. So yeah, we'll wait now till the 8 weeks of championship starts up here now. The old split season gives a bit of relief in the league. Well, we're one game away from promotion in the football league, so that's in the last game we have to win one more, so that'll be the stress for this year. But I think as you know, coaching teams, if you feel like the lads have done enough and you've done enough, like you're not too bad. So I'm fairly level-headed about it, so it's not too. You know,
it's not too taxing, yeah.
But the lads might say different, that I'm probably sending them text at all times of the day about what training they've done and what they haven't done. But I would say I'm relaxed about it.
But that's what I was going to ask. Do you ever find, like, now coming back into this environment from the States, like you have to nearly stop yourself at times and say, like, Jesus, because of the habits that you've built through half your career over in the States and going by their model, that now you bring it over here and you're in the habit of doing something, whether it be sending a player a text at 11:30 at night. You didn't get that session done earlier. You have to say, oh, well, maybe there's bigger fish to fry here, or there's lower hanging fruit.
I'm probably a pain in the ass. So I'm probably a pain in the ass. There's a few of our men's and women's players that probably get more messages than some, and coaches as well. So I'd say they'll appreciate it in a few years or at the end of the year. So I'm probably on the extreme end at the moment, but I think I definitely said to myself starting the project in line with Setanta and the club that I did want to be somewhat uncompromising in trying to get standards and protocols in place. And I think that tone needs to be set quite early on. I don't think you can laissez-faire in the first 2 years and then suddenly turn around and say, well, actually, lads, ladies, I want to have higher standards. I think you need to, like, there's always room to loosen it up if you feel like the responsibility level is there through coaches, players, whatever. And I think we've definitely loosened it up even within 5 months. But like, it's very hard in my experience to start off very soft and then suddenly turn around and be like, oh, hold on here now a second. Actually, before you turned up at 7:01 and that was okay. Well, now if you're here 7:01, you can't train, So that's been probably clear from day one, and people probably know that quite clearly within what the expectation is,
Yeah, absolutely. It's gas, like, because I was actually talking about this on Instagram earlier, because last night I was training the ladies and we were doing just our microdose of max speed because they're playing on Wednesday for the week. So it'll be their only time they'll hit max speed. And we were doing a flying 10 and then they were going to do a couple of wicket runs. But usually in the past, their first sprint, for whatever reason, they're not used to going 100% intensity off the bat. Yeah. Because maybe they're trying to, like, not even thinking about it, but subconsciously trying to conserve a bit of energy for the session. But I've been trying to build on them to push the pedal down, like, and go 100% initially. And last night I said we were going to do 2 flying 10s and then 2 wicket runs. But their first flying 10 was of such an intensity and such intent that I said, girls, that was really, really good. We're just going to move on to the wicket run now. And then they all kind of stopped and looked at me and was like, what's going on here? Like, why is he being nice? And I was like, well, I've done my job right, because it's easier to set the standards initially and be a bit of a prick that turns out to be sound rather than being a sound lad that turns out to be a prick. And I think a lot of coaches have been messaging me, coaches and teachers, and saying, like, 100% that's the way to do it. Like, one of the teachers said, we're told in school, no smile September. So when you go in September, you set the stall out, and then they know what the standards are and they know what's expected of them. And then after that, you can loosen the strings a little bit. And like, that's been happening equally with maybe like our seniors. We were running primers prior to gym sessions and it was a non-negotiable, but now we're at that stage of the season. If you want to do the primer, you can do the primer. If you don't want to do the primer, just go home and relax and forget about work and forget about football, and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll play a match and hopefully we'll win. So you have to have that little bit of, I don't know, you have to be relaxed with them and you have to be able to negotiate with them what works for the individual athlete, but also have the model of what works for the group too, don't you?
100%. I think, and what you touched on there is another thing about the GAA model, that an advantage of having someone who's consistently there coaching the groups is that they're like, the GAA, say an adult team in the GAA, the spectrum is so broad of, like, we have a fella who's 17, who's only going into leaving cert next year, that starts midfield in senior football. And then we have a fella who's the other midfielder who's 36 with a child. And to think that you can have the exact same 100% requirement of those two fellas is absolutely nuts. You know what I mean? And then there's anything and everything in between those two extremes. And we actually have a fellow who still plays, who's a very successful player, played for Cork, who's 40. You'd think he's 25, still plays senior, has 2 kids, married. So like, that's our extreme. You know, a 17-year-old turning 18, just finished 5th year, and a 40-year-old who's played senior for the club for 22 years and has played intercounty senior, and you're managing that range. And I think in the traditional model of, which is through no fault of anyone other than how it's been, is like you might pay a coach or an S&C or both to come in 2 nights a week. They see the players for those 2 nights. And then, you know, it's maybe a more narrow-sighted, like, you know, well, I need to see those 2 nights. I need to do this. Whereas if clubs, I know you're around your club a lot, you know, if clubs can move to find, if the GAA can support and clubs can find ways to support and organizations can find ways to support of having more full-time professionals, whether that be coaching officers or S&Cs or athletic development, that are around to manage those aspects of the program. You know, I think that's, you know, that's why some fellas get frustrated with the GAA with the, oh, there's a drinking ban in August, or the, you know, that was around for a while. That's kind of gone now, I think. I don't think that's I think that's out the window in most places. But like, you know, or whatever, like, oh, if everyone's not there, you're dropped, like, kind of thing. Like, you know, and I'm fairly, in the strict sense, I'm probably on the more extreme side, but like, we all need to realize, like, we need people around who can manage that, who have experience managing that. Again, I said at the Irish S&C conference at the end of I had a presentation about this. Like, I think the GAA and the clubs themselves, and probably Club Rugby and other community organizations, they need to go get experienced practitioners and experienced coaches into the clubs, and it shouldn't be an entry-level job, you know, because the way they're paid and funded right now, whether that's per diem or per day or per night, they're entry-level positions for a lot of people. So I think there's a massive responsibility on all the organizations to go out and say, like, well, let's get a coach with 5 to 10 years or plus experience, and let's fund that properly, and let's get proper facilities. And I think there's numerous different organizations in the country showing that it can be done. You know, it just takes a lot of legwork in the background. So I think that's a massive thing, you know, and because then you can not freak out when 5 lads don't turn up to your primer. You know, you understand, well, Friday night not at the primer might be a bit easier for the boys who have, you know,
young family,
babysitting, whatever. Yeah. No, I'm on a crusade to bring from the American model that everybody trains in the morning. It's like my dream.
It's not possible when lads are on site though. It's just
I want all GAA teams to train at 5 a.m. year round.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, they'll be training on their own in my club because I won't be there at 5 a.m.
One of our older fellas said a few weeks ago, so he said, are we going to start having fucking championship at 6:30 in the morning now as well? I was like, yeah, if you could get it out of the way and then you have a clear run of the day afterwards.
Yeah. But I'm just interested because obviously it's a pretty dynamic environment, as you just touched on there, and there's loads to think about. Sometimes more so than in professional sport, because some lads are working an office job, other lads are, as we said, working construction, and some lads have young families to look after. Some lads are still in school, leaving cert. So it's just moving so dynamically between that. And sometimes there can be a bit of a sense from the older lads, as you just said there, sure, why can't I do what the younger lads are doing there? Sure, I'll do 5-6 sets there as well, same as him. I said, well, no, you can do 3, it'll be grand. 3 will just touch that quality, that sound. And outside, it's like, well, you're running this distance, he's running this distance. And so, well, why can't I run that distance? Well, it's the right amount of training for you to have you right for the whole season. And sometimes because there has been that culture of this is a non-negotiable, everybody does this, and it's very black or white. Now, when you come in with that aspect that it's a little bit more changeable or moldable to the athlete, I have a group and they call themselves the hoppers. and they're all the lads that are probably 34 and up, all with young families. And last season, they all were getting Achilles tendinopathy. So at the start of the season, they were doing rudiment hops when the other lads were doing sets of back squats and front squats, you know. Now they did get their back squats and front squats done, but they had to do the rudiment hop series first. And they're like, what the hell are you preparing us for, Pete? And now we're in the season and none of them are getting the same problems as last year. And now they're realizing, Jesus, maybe there is something to this kind of individualization of training to an extent.
100%, yeah. And I think that's a key point. Like, you're talking about the individualization. I think that word scares people sometimes, because they're like, oh, I have to write 35 separate programs. And like you said, I'm definitely fine. Like, I have a basic program in place for, say, adult men, and there's a handful of fellas. They come in, they have a folder, they take their card, they fill it. I don't even print them out a different one. They just know to get it, and they come over and talk to me and say, look, no bilateral loading for you, unilateral loading. Here's what you do. It's like tiny changes, and that's what true individualization is. Like, this concept in this environment, this concept of like 35 different programs is absolutely, you know, I think that's something people probably try to lead you to believe if they're trying to impress you in some sort of way. Like, as we both probably know, there's only so much squat, push, hinge, pull, single leg, double leg, like, unless you're trying to do something totally exotic, you know, it can be quite similar, you know.
It'll be very similar. Very similar.
And you're, you know, if you have a fella who's 30 and has long-term injury, like we do, lower limb, who's maybe a good player, I just don't load a few of them bilaterally. Like, just do all unilateral stuff. And then the young fellas are like, well, why am I doing heavy back squats? I was like, because you're 20.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going. Don't question me. Yeah. The older lads can question me. You can't question me because you're not old enough yet. That's a joke. But to be fair, as you just touched on there, like, the programs are going to look very similar for everyone. Now, what I do is I group the athletes based on what they kind of need, I suppose, or maybe their injury history, or even position sometimes. But in Gaelic football and hurling, it's been shown that there's not that much difference in positional demand. So it's not a huge change, but we might just change the exercise variation. So we might change the range of motion. As you said, we might change the loading pattern. So some lads might have a barbell on their back. Some lads might be going dumbbell loaded. Some lads could be going unilateral. Some be going bilateral. And then we might change the volumes slightly throughout the season based on how they're reacting to the program. Because as you said, in the past, a coach hasn't been there to observe it. It's just been, here's the program. This is what you do. And I'm going to expect everybody's going to react the exact same to this program, even though that there are so many other variables. So that's the benefits of having a coach there with you. But I'm interested to kind of ask you now, because you've name dropped a number of huge names in the Irish S&C scope earlier on, a good while earlier. But obviously Setanta are up there best in the world. Like, so I want to ask you, because obviously you're doing so much coaching. You've touched on like how you work with the committee as well. How do you maintain an open sort of dialogue between your role and the lads in Setanta as well as the committee? Are you kind of the go-between there? Are you at committee meetings? Or because that's a very difficult kind of place to inhabit.
I suppose what we did with the partnership, I suppose first of all, both sides hopefully trust me. One's my employer, but it's also, look, it's with people I really, really respect, you know. So, you know, and that's an excellent network to be a part of within Setanta, because there's people to call or lean on if there's questions about, you know, what professional or whatever projects, you know, just to talk things through. And then I would say the club trust me to a massive extent, because I suppose the partnership came about driven by me, straightforward, like, with the help of, you know, people I named earlier that wanted it on the Setanta end and wanted it on the Bishopstown end. And I suppose I'm the joining factor, just because I'm from there. So I would be in, it would be, I think, a different environment if you were an outsider, if I want to call it that, because as you know, in any club, there's always going to be naysayers and people looking over your shoulder and saying, well, he's just doing this for money, or not that there's massive money in it or anything like that, but he's just doing this for, it's his job. Whereas I know that the people in the club know I'm passionate about Bishopstown GAA, because while every year while I was gone, I was doing stuff for them anyway. You know what I mean? So I suppose that's, you know, I'm the lead on site for Setanta. So I through that. And then just in regards of formal communication and review periods, we have a performance committee.
Great.
So Des Ryan sits on that from Setanta. I sit on that as the go-between. The club chairman sits on it. The club games committee sits on it. And then there's a representative from the Camogie section of the club, and there's a representative from the ladies football section of the club. And then Mark Kilgallen, who's an S&C, who's part of the project, he's from Bishopstown as well. So he's kind of like the club's external S&C consultant away from Setanta, in that if there, it's nearly like a checks and balances or a safety net, that if there was a conflict with something that I was doing, which there's not going to be, but you need that the club could go to Mark and say, look, is what Ian's doing in the best interest of athletic development in the club, or is he doing this because, you know, a company wants him to do it? You know what I mean? So there's a nice mix there. So that we've only met twice now at this point. We're only 5 months into the year, and like there's just actions just come out of those meetings. Some of it's review points, but you know, a lot of the things that came out of the main first meeting really they're going to be next year. You know, like they're going to be actionable items next year, just because you're halfway through the season. But there are things like medical policy structures, and how we're allocating our coaching hours through Setanta, what's the best format for that, and looking at, you know, we have the club put in a brand new 4G pitch a year and a half ago, so we use that, and just looking at like best use of 4G and grass and how to acclimatize from going from one to the other, because obviously there's, you know, the club did a lot of research into, you know, is the pitch, because obviously there's talk, some people say it causes injury, some say it doesn't. There's nothing conclusive on it. We've had no injury, but we're definitely looking at what's friendly to the players to transition them off 4G, like things like that are like, you know, that would never, those conversations would probably never go on if we didn't have that, or have the kind of formalized setting. So loads of things like that, you know, and that keeps it professional. It keeps it that if there is issues, it can be brought to the table, where it's not like, Ian, go sort that out, you know, this needs to be done, you know. So it's pretty straightforward. I think we're lucky that everyone involved to this point, there doesn't seem to be, you know, there's no real major conflicts of interest, you know.
No. But that doesn't mean there won't be conflict.
Yeah.
That's why you have Mark there as well, I'm sure, so that there is that tiny bit of, well, maybe could we do it a slightly different way? And then he poses that question to you, and then you go, well, maybe there is a slightly different way I could do that, and you rethink it, I suppose. But it must be useful to have so many great communicators on that board, because then it can be clearly outlined to, say, the people not from a performance background or a strength and conditioning background, why you're doing what you're doing and what the benefits are. And you can dispel any myths, as you just said, in regards to 4G, etc., which can be prevalent around the club. Like,
yeah, I think so. And I think one of the biggest challenges is actually getting the communications across to the it's because it's a voluntary organization's community, like actually being able to get people in the room at the same time, because like I know like there's Zooms and I know there's emails and texts and WhatsApp, but in my mind, like nothing beats having all the relevant parties in the room, just so it clears up a lot of conflict that could potentially happen. Not like serious, but just questions that come up. Because I think when we did our schedule of kind of we kind of did a phase 1 scheduling, then a phase 2 scheduling, and before we did the phase 2 scheduling, we did our first round of player testing or profiling for the under kids, and we just got one representative of each age group in the room. And because we've been trying via email and WhatsApp to like, when are we going to do it? When are they available? And like, it was kind of sorted out quite quickly once everyone was just there. And I think the big challenge is you can have this performance committee meeting and you get all this great information, like these are the actions, but it's like getting that information out and across that this is going to be changed or improved upon is very difficult, because human nature is, realistically, like, people don't read the communications that are sent out to them at all. Like, that's players' WhatsApp groups, that's code, like that's every organization in the world. That's every university in America. The athletic director sends out a weekly email with updates with any information you could ever need that no one ever reads. And like, now certain people read it, like me, because I'm a pain in the ass and I want to read it. But like, you know, there's lots of people, like coaches particularly, like full-time professional coaches, they don't read anything. They just focus on like their team. And it's the same pattern at the community game. You know, people don't go into detail of like a communication that goes out, whether that be text, scheduling, email. And so you're kind of relying on the people at the top of each section to be the good communicators, which I think we have, to make sure that their under 12 coach knows, or their under 14 coach knows, you know. So someone's got to be the pain in the ass that's constantly following up and asking and like, well, did you receive that? Did you reply to it? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think finding clear communication pathways to get those messages across is massive. I don't think we've struck gold on that yet. I think a lot of it ends up just being individual message, which isn't obviously time efficient, and that's growing pains. It's easier for me to just directly text or call an individual coach from each group, which isn't when you have 4 different sections in hurling, football, camogie, and LGFA. So that's 4 different managers or coaches besides their assistant coaches for every age group. That number is, we've over 100 something volunteer coaches, you know. So that it's a lot of people. And they're probably wondering, like, what are you doing half the time? Like, you said you were going to do this, and you're like, it's on the list. Don't worry.
It'll get done. Yeah,
it'll get done, but it's number 87 on the list.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's you know, definitely an interesting one. You know, and again, I suppose a struggle every community club and any organization has, but a benefit of being somewhat full-time in the club, outside of the other Setanta duties, then, you know, that allows me to be able to do a lot of that, you know.
Absolutely. And nothing beats an actual face-to-face conversation, as you said, like, and it'll often happen. You send a message and, did you do that? No, I didn't. Well, I said it. Oh, sorry, I didn't read the end of your message. Well, why did you read the start of it and not the end of it, is what I always think, you know. But like, that's me just being finicky as well. Like and that's the importance of having those conversations and having clearly outlined, we're meeting at this time for a half an hour and we're going over everything, and then everybody's on the same page in regards to it. But it sounds like even in this, your first year in the role, like, you've had a few things, I wouldn't even call them mistakes yet, but you've seen a few points that you could improve on next year. Yeah. And then I know you've been writing, well, you wrote a great article on the GAA split season a few months ago. So have there been anything in regards to your programming for the senior men's, ladies, footballers, hurlers, camogie, that you are thinking, because it's our first year of the split season, are you thinking next year, I might do something slightly differently next year?
Well, I think one thing with this was the project started in January 2nd or Monday, January 4th. And like, we kind of got up and going then. Whereas I think in this model, like, your off season of like actual strict physical development is actually November and December. So we missed 8 weeks of training. So we had, as you know, you can't make up for what you missed in January. So like, I think we'll be in a lot better place, because number one, a lot of people are going to have come through a 10-month season or 9-month season. First of all, the club season isn't a split season. They can tell you that all they want, but it really is not, because you've relegation in leagues. So we play 18 weeks in a row because we're a dual club, hurling football of games you need to win to not get relegated. So there's some work the GAA needs to do on that.
Smaller leagues is my opinion, like less games, but everybody is of the opinion. Sure, they're young lads, they love games, play as many games as well.
It's killing the dual player model. Like, we're a dual club, like hurling and football equally, and it's just older fellas are like, I'm I'm only playing one, so it kills that. But so yeah, I think one thing is structurally, look, you're going to have a November and December period. That's a training period. Now, I've put a lot of thought already into how that would look structured, so you're not, flying them out too early on in the year. But I think that'll be new to some people too, in that, no lads, just because championship ends in October, I think the county finals in Cork are the second week of October. So if you were to play in the county final, you actually would have October, November. You'd nearly have 10 to 12 weeks. And a lot of lads would just do nothing for 10 to 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there's no way in hell I'm letting that happen. So coming up with strategies to make it both enjoyable, competitive, but also, how that's going to work for them with different groups. That's going to be a big part of add-on for next year, so that when we do get to January, there's probably a bit more time for some of the skill work and stuff on the pitches and stuff like that we probably had to forego this year just because we were really needed a base of physical conditioning. That's one thing. We started out this year with the adult players, and it was kind of an initiative to get buy into the project too, is we actually had these massive mixed S&C groups where we had 2 or 3 coaches in the room and 30 to 40 players, 45 players, but they could have been from any team. They could have been a junior, a senior, a man, a woman, and it was really good. It has its merits, but I would think we would go away from as the season went on anyway, it goes away from that because of training schedules. But I think we would go away from that on a consistent basis and just have panel training, senior training, junior training. And for a number of reasons, just the programming can be better, the coaching can be more detailed, but also it drives competitiveness to be from fellas trying to get from the junior team to the senior team, or fellas on the senior team realizing I need to do this to stay part of this panel. I think, and that's not strictly my decision, that'll be when management teams come in, but it'll be a recommendation, I suppose. What is, I think, we need to drive that competitiveness within the group training versus, the blanket, all right, lads, we're training in January, and then you've all the juniors, all the seniors. So if you have the resource and the coaches to split it and make it competitive to work your way up or down, I think that would be something for sure. In regards to dual players, I think we were doing a mixed week of training. They might do a hurling session and a football session. I'd err back to maybe a week on, week off, or 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, maybe a little bit. I think it gives them a bit more consistency of development of that game. I go back and forth on that.
You must have a load of dual players then, do you? Quite a few,
Yeah, we do, but we don't actually have that many out and out starters on both senior teams anymore.
Right,
less
gotcha.
than 5. We used to have, I would say 10 years ago, it was be up around 9 or 10 of the starting on both teams probably played both, started senior every game. Now some of that's to do with age, that look, it's just not realistic for some fellas to be able to do that anymore in their 30s. Some of it is, 18 weeks in a row league game, 2 weeks off, and then 6 championship games in 8 weeks. Just doesn't allow for it professionally, personally. Whereas if you only play one, you're in a pretty good model, I suppose. If our footballers had a league game last week, so they might train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, play Saturday. But then this week they know that they're going to train Monday, Wednesday, and then they're going to train Friday morning early. So then they're off all Friday, all Saturday, all Sunday, on a week that they don't have a league game. So they can have that social, personal life that the club GAA player probably really, really wants. And they can schedule that fairly far in advance. Now, you factor it, some of our fellas who don't play senior in both, they will turn out for the junior team because we need the numbers for the other code. So that's we played our junior. We'll try get those games into Thursday nights and stuff like that, just because again, it's a bit more friendly to them. I think we've done a lot to try to be friendly to the players in regards, we understand there's other things outside, but we're also going to ask a lot of you as well, and we're just getting started. Look, as I said, I think the under 12s are born in 2010. So hopefully in 2030, hopefully in 2030, we'll be reaping some rewards. 2028 maybe we'll be reaping some rewards of this work,
So do you think then, by the sounds of things, this new session model, even though it could be improved on, is definitely suiting the club player better than the previous model?
I think with the underage, like in school time, the model is to bring them up 15 to 45 minutes before training. I think 100% I'm very confident that's the model for clubs, because you're not going to get them up another night during the school year because of the school commitments, soccer, art, singing, music, grinds, whatever. They're coming up anyway. All it takes is for them to come up a small bit earlier or stay a small bit later. So I think the way to get your athletic development units in for the underage player is on the same night, and you block it up. It also gives you an opportunity to teach them about nutrition, because it's basically like you need to bring a bottle of milk and a banana. You know, it's literally that simple. I love mothers giving out to me, telling their kids to take the milk from the fridge. But in regards to the adult players, I think we're providing a flexible option in that they can build their S&C into the same night of when they train. So if they are someone who doesn't feel like they can give more than 2 nights of training and a game commitment, there is no excuse not to do their gym, for example. Like they'll get their conditioning and their stuff in training, so that takes care of itself. But they have access to coaching, and they have access to the facility on their off nights as well. And what you find with that is, I'm finding it now in the summer, they're starting to veer more towards doing their extra sessions then, just because
They're going on holidays.
Yeah, like literally. And what happens? You see it you just see groups of fellas. There's a pattern of the fellas who want to come up at 6 o'clock, do it before training, and then go out on the pitch. And then there's groups of fellas who want to come up on Tuesday, Thursday when they're not training because they don't want to be rushed. They want to take their time. They're single. They're whatever. They're just like, this is what to do now. They have access in the morning, every single morning from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. as well. So with me or someone else there. So there's absolutely no excuse not to do it. So that's, we've had really good uptake on that, like fellas before work, like professionals and girls, men and women. I think that's a nice, like, as I told you, I'm on a crusade to move all training to morning.
Yeah, to the mornings, yeah. But then what I was going to ask you, because it seems that it's benefiting everybody time-wise, I was thinking there must be somebody that the new season model doesn't work for. And the two people that came to mind were probably one, the ground staff, because the pitches don't get much of a break because everybody's playing consistently. And it's important as coaches that we take that into account whenever they tell us to get off pitch 1, get onto pitch 2. Yeah. And the second person is probably the S&C performance staff. And that's why I'm questioning, how the hell do you balance your family life? Because this probably, even though it sounds like you're there constantly, this is probably not even the most hours you've put into a gig over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, the hours were easy comparatively. I would in regards to the pitches, you know what? I think the installation of the 4G has been massive.
Oh yeah.
I think we maximize that. The winter gives us that, but also the club ground facilities opening is actually Saturday, this coming Saturday. The president of the GAA is coming down to do it. So it's a big day in the club. But you know, there's been massive over the last 5 years. There's been massive infrastructural development. So I suppose starting this year is the next phase of the club development in regards to coaching. You know, I was getting the infrastructure in, and let's get the coaching going. So like all the pitches have been redone. So like 3 full-size pitches, a smaller kind of children's pitch. We've a fairly big indoor sports hall, really good ball alley that's lit. You know, the last thing that's going is a second set of floodlights on one of the other pitches. But like the club committee and the club itself, through fundraising and donations and stuff like that, just have done phenomenal work in the last 5 years to get the infrastructure right. Like I know you've probably seen pictures of the gym and you're like, oh, the gym's really nice, but like the whole place has been really, really developed in the last 5 years. And that's, you know, suburb of the city, growing population, bigger membership, high club membership numbers, things like that. It all drives that, you know, sponsorships and all these different things. Like, so, you know, that's in place. That's, you know, that's tipping away. Like the club doesn't have like a facilities manager. You know, everything's voluntary. The ground staff is the guy who does the pitches is a guy who's a farming background but an ex-guard, and he's excellent at it. And there's people that help him. but the club could definitely use a facilities manager, I think, but like that's obviously resource, it's finance, but it could, because there's an active bar as well that operates as a coffee shop at the weekends for parents and everything. So it's busy. It's a busy place. So that's that side of it. In regards to the hours, I suppose my wife didn't actually move to Ireland till last week, so she wasn't here for the first 5 months. She's actually gone on holidays to Greece as well without me for 10 days with a friend. So I suppose I've been able to go all into it here in the last 5 months without much regard for anybody but myself. I don't have kids at the moment. So she'll be, my wife's American, but she's in the business. Like she's a director of sports medicine at a university in the States. So she's been through the schedules and stuff like that. But ideally, the balance will become a bit better.
After the last 5 months, it's probably you've put the things into structure that now you'll have more time. The process is streamlined to an extent. I know you're always going to want to add on other things, but I'm finding that myself anyway, coming into this time of year. Now we're just in a flow. It's just matches and training sessions, really, because everybody knows the habits that are necessary to stay at that level.
I think so. I also think this was a frustration there when you see, the same thing. Like you're like, that needs to be tweaked or that needs to be changed, and like it's probably not the right time of year to do it. Like as I said before, like I have a list of so many things that I'm like, all right, first thing in October, like this is the new setup, not the new, but these are the change. But if they're just things it would be selfish to change them mid-year. It would be for yourself. It wouldn't be for the benefit of the club or the players. So comparable to the American schedule, which is 4 or 5 a.m. to 8, 9, 10 p.m., like with no break, really, maybe a bit of training.
And a commute,
depending on where you are. I think that's it's different. I don't think there's an expectation I know there's not an expectation from the club or Setanta for me to be there all the time. There's flex now. Like it's not like, if I wasn't in the gym at the 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. session and one of the Setanta assistant coaches was there, there'd be no fuss kicked up. Whereas in the States model, if you were the head S&C, like I was at a couple of places, and you weren't at a team session and you had decided to go to a family event, there'd be like, probably have a fucking phone call within minutes saying like, where are you? You know what I mean? Like, this is what you're paid to do. I suppose for me, it's just balancing the correct, appropriate amount of time that I can give to the club in the professional sense, the appropriate amount of time I can give to the club in a volunteer sense, which people probably don't actually realize that I actually do a lot of stuff voluntarily for the club at the moment. That's not part of my job, but it's the same as anybody else is doing. And then the appropriate amount of time to, other Setanta business, whether that be Setanta Wellness Commercial, development, articles, dealing with other organizations, presentations, all these different things. I think the one thing actually definitely missed out on is trying to get enough time to do coach education with their own coaches hands-on. And that's for a number of reasons. Like they're hourly coaches, they have other teams and stuff they work with. So there's a certain onus on them to do coach development, that they need to make themselves available. Which is a challenge of the young coach, the early practitioner. I think that realizing that, you're not going to get paid to do your coach education. If you're not on the clock, but you want to learn for 3 hours, like that's probably your time. So I think that's definitely something, like figuring out more ways moving forward to get all the coaches who are working with us in Bishopstown together. Because if we're all there, someone's in the gym, someone's on pitch 1, someone's on pitch 2, someone's on pitch 3, and then you get together, it's 8:30 at night, and you're not going to sit around for 2 hours then and whatever. Like you're going to try to let them get out of there. And you're also working to budgets and allocations and things like that. So, that's definitely something, I'd like to improve upon as myself, as managing those coaches to have more time for them. And that'll come as well, just as you said, getting the processes in place.
Yeah. Pick the low hanging fruit first, and then you can focus on the rest after that, I suppose. And that is a thing as a young coach you don't realize is why am I not being paid to go to this thing to learn about S&C? Well, you realize in time is you're investing financially and time-wise in yourself so that you can make more revenue down the line, but that's a slow burn. But in terms of the US model, last question before we go on to quickfire questions, is that the major drawback to the American model from your vast experience over there? They don't have the same attitude towards, like, people have a life outside of their job that we have here in Ireland. And have you noticed a clear difference there in that some of the coaches might be even saying to you at Bishopstown, will you go home, will you?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
There's definitely a clear difference. Yeah, I think it's hard to compare in that, I suppose, in all the environments I really was in there, like, everyone is being paid to be there and it is their livelihood, and the pressure, it's a more of a pressure environment because it's pretty much a results-based business. Even at the college level, if you don't win, you're not going to have a job. So I understand why, I think in 10 years, if you ask me this question, if I had kids and stuff like that, I'd probably have a different answer, because I think that, obviously, I don't know, but most people speak about that, giving them a different perspective. But I'm a massive fan of putting a lot of time into your work. I think we're gone too extreme on the other end, where people are like, 37 and a half hours, go home. Like,
yeah.
Like, no, I think people should be reimbursed properly. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think, don't ask me to do 2 jobs and then not pay me for them. But, it's a difficult one. It's different. I think in 10 years, I'll have a different perspective on it. I think the professional versus volunteer environment is a totally different thing. When I say professional, I mean college as well, because in essence, the athletes are being paid they're on scholarship. They're there, like, they are there to do that thing, and the pro game is obviously the pro game. So, I don't have to answer your question directly. But yeah.
So if you could change one thing about the American model, then what do you think you would change?
I think all the institutions need to be forced to have fixed duration contracts. I think a lot,
and that gets rid of that scarcity kind of mindset of fear in regards, I could be gone if we lose the next 2 games.
Yeah, I suppose, personally, I've been in, normally in the US, when you start out, at the entry level, a lot of the contracts, and even later on, they're at will contracts, so pretty much they can get rid of you whenever they want. But as you go up the levels and you get a bit more experience and you have some power to negotiate, you get a fixed duration contract if you can get them. And I've luckily the last few stops been able to, over the years, had those. They just give you a cushion because you know what your guaranteed income is for that number of years, and you can easily take that position, because if they do want to get rid of you, they have to pay it pretty much. And it's in writing and it's done. So if I had to change one thing about the American model, I think that's it. I think it's ludicrous to have an at-will employee and then expect them to give absolutely everything, and then at the end of the year you can get rid of them and they have nothing. I think that's not a nice place for anybody to be in mentally, because if you're working in a losing college football program and you're an at-will employee and you're the entry-level assistant strength coach, you probably know you're getting fired at the end of the year.
And you can do nothing about the result as well.
You can do nothing about it, but where's your motivation to work hard? Because you're gone. You're probably not getting paid that well. And then where's your motivation to have your head in the game? All you're doing when you're not there is looking for another job, so you're not unemployed, So I think that would be massive. I'm not sure how that works in Ireland. I'm still getting my head around the legalities of contracts in Ireland.
It's just, in Ireland, it's more so a shake of hands, and if you do someone out of it, you won't be getting one of their cousins knows you, and you won't be getting anything off any of that family for the rest of it. It's a small place, so everybody's generally pretty courteous to each other here. But
I like to have agreements in writing.
Yeah,
I'm a massive fan of having these things in writing. I'm probably
same. It doesn't work in the GAA. It's all that's grand. We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
So yeah, I think that would definitely be one thing. I think that just helps the profession.
Absolutely.
And like, why shouldn't someone? And like, if the fixed duration is 1 year, like, grand, like, you've signed it, you know. But the at-will employee thing is fucking, that's a joke.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think it will change now that I think the standards of the profession have been raised in recent years as well, like across the board, like in that the average coach now is far better than what the average coach was maybe when we were starting out. Now, that might be partly because the research has moved on, the resources available to coaches have moved on, but I think for the most part, and I am seeing it generally now, the entry-level positions and the internships and like all the positions, there has been an increase in the amount of compensation for those roles. Generally, I would say the average. And if somebody puts up a role that's completely like ridiculous, they're called out on it fairly soon as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the broad sense of it, like, so I started interning in the States in 2010. I had started coaching over here a couple of years before that, so that's 12 years ago. But there's way more internships, whether they're paid or unpaid, available. There's way more graduate assistantships, and there's way more full-time roles. There's way more part-time roles. There's way more head roles. There's way more departments. There's separate departments for sports science and nutrition and psychology. That wasn't in existence when that was nowhere except a few places when I started. In like, you know, there's way more opportunity, like 100%. I think like the mid-range schools in the States, the kind of head level salaries probably haven't increased a whole pile. Now, if you're at a bigger school and you're somewhat decent at negotiating a contract or have something to do it for you,
you get in writing as well.
Yeah, and getting writing, the top end has gone up. But the mid end is the same. You know, I think fellas making whatever 40 grand entry level S&C in the States, they're probably still making 40 grand, you know, 10 years later, you know, and that's disappointing. You know, you'd like to see it drive up, but you know, that's a whole other conversation on accreditations and unionizations and all these kind of things that are they're different stories.
And I think it will happen as well.
It will.
And inevitably will happen, but that, as you said, that's a story for another day. So we'll move on to the quickfire questions to finish. The first one is proudest achievement to date.
Under 10 Street League hurling champions.
And that's what we mean. Like, it is fun to win at the same time. We were talking about it earlier. Like that's why you play. You want to win.
So I did this presentation for the Irish S&C Network and made a picture on it from the childhood under 10 Street League with the cup with my mother, and I sent the picture of the team to the fellas who were on the team, like, and it stemmed a massive argument for about 2 days on a text message because we had lost the under 9 Street League final through robbery of a bad refereeing decision. So the Street Leagues are gone now because a lot of them aren't living locally. They'd come in from further out, but they do go games and all that kind of stuff. But under 10 Street League champions.
Yeah, we used to have the Street Leagues as well in the hurling, and I remember every time you played, it was always pissing rain. It was always the worst weather of the year. I don't know, I can't even remember what time of year they were played at, but I just remember dreading going down because they were played in like the bad field as well, like as in the public fields. That's where they played the matches.
Green.
Yeah, the grass was that high, like, you know, so I can't remember it ever being as enjoyable as yours, but it's definitely a great, proudest achievement to have, I'd say. And I'd say the rest of the boys on the team cherish it as well.
Yeah,
so
it's the current Bishopstown Junior C football team.
Ted, right. Good that they still have the lineage, and hopefully the lineage continues then, even with this furthering in the athletic development, I suppose. That's the plan. So then the next one is favorite athlete of all time.
That's what before. I have two though, but Johnny Wilkinson and Roy Keane. If I have to pick one, I don't know.
I thought you were going to give me one when you said if I had to pick one, but
for different reasons. For different reasons.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'd be a big fan of both of them. Huge fan of both of them. Really, like Johnny's autobiography just like changed things for me, really. And equally Roy's, like, at the same time. I think Roy's first one more so than the second one, which was, I think, just up till after he had came back from his torn ACL. So it was before he'd had the run-ins with Ferguson and finished with United and all. And like, you learn a lot from that caliber of player in how they treat their bodies, I suppose, and treat their own performance. And you also, from the two of them as well, from an outside perspective looking in, you can see the drawbacks to doing that too, mentally.
100%. I think the extremism associated with like high-end elite success, you know, like if they weren't who they were, like, would they have been that successful is the key question, you know? The answer is probably no, you know? So I think even when you talk about, look, it's not comparable, you talk about like working hours and different jobs and different things like that, like there's a reason certain coaches or certain players like get to certain positions, you know, and if it's extremism, whether it's healthy or not healthy, you know, or whether certain projects are, you know, like how many like real extreme successful people are like super balanced, you know? They might become balance gurus after they've made their money or after they've become really successful. But when they sit in that moment when they're in essence nothing, it's extremism, you know, and that message is only for a certain group of people. You know, that's not for everyone at a community level, because it's not about that for a lot of people, but for a certain tier of person, it potentially is, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I think the key point as well, and I probably learned it from maybe both of them, but probably more so Roy Keane, is count your hours that you're on the pitch. And it's the same thing, and count your coaching hours, because there is an optimum amount of coaching hours you should do, but maybe don't count the graft that you put in behind the scenes, because you will be putting in a lot of graft if you want to take yourself to the next level. And if you apply that to an athlete as well, it's not just what you're doing on the field. You have to do the right amount on the field, but what are you doing away from the field when you go away? What are you doing in terms of your sleep, your nutrition, like your lifestyle factors? Are you looking after yourself? Are you doing the prep? Are you doing the video work, the analysis, etc.? That's necessary to get to the top level. And if you're not, then you can't be frustrated when you don't get to that top level.
Or if you won't, just be a freak of nature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I've seen a few of those.
You've seen a few of those, yeah. Well, I'm hoping to hear a bit about them off the air a little bit. Not that they'll be listening to the Petey Performance podcast anyway.
You never know.
Artists you've been listening to a lot recently. Who's playing in the gym in Bishopstown?
You know what? There's this fella. I listen to anything. It doesn't matter, but I'd be giving the lads a hard time. Like, 'cause I try to get them to put the music on. Like, but all the young fellas are giving me a hard time, because there's this fella called Dave that they all listen to. And I have no idea who Dave. Well, I know who he is now because
the lads.
Every time I go in now, like, they're like, we'll put Dave on for you. We'll put Dave on for you. I'm like, all right, lads, put Dave on. So,
he's good, but like
so Dave is on my radar to try listen to, so I can be more in touch with the 20-year-old players.
Hey, it doesn't matter. I've tried putting on Dave, and they'll just take the piss out of you regardless of what you put on. So it doesn't matter. Who's playing you in the movie?
God. You know what? I don't know who the person's name is, but I get the piss taken out of me because there's a movie called American History X.
Oh yeah, Edward Norton is his name.
But not that fella. There's his kid brother in the movie. Apparently when I was a child, I looked like him with the short hair. So whoever that is looked like me when I was a child.
We'll have to look up and see if he's still working, or if that was his big break and getting back for the Ian Jones movie. Have you been reading any books lately, or do you have the time?
No, I haven't been reading. I haven't been reading anything new at this point. You know what though? I go in and out. I go in and out of Johnny Wilkinson's older book like all the time. Like, I haven't read anything new. Probably.
That's the training one, not the autobiography. That's the one.
Yeah, it's like Steve. You know why I actually started looking at it again was I have it digitally, but Steve Black died. Passed away. His coach, and his content. It's a page him and a page Wilkinson.
I've seen it.
The book goes back and forth. So it's really interesting because it's different perspectives of what was going on in the training week, you know. So I'll delve in. I'll go look into that regularly, day or two. Just I started looking at it again because Steve Black put it into my head when they had put out that he passed away. That's a good one. That book was given to me to read when I was a teenager, like young. And I think like I was into training anyway, but like I just got really into training. I was like, oh, Johnny Wilkinson kicked through both of his groins practicing kicking. I need to wear through both of my groins.
You're better off not mentioning the war with me now. Because I took the autobiography as a Bible and said, if you want to do it, you have to do that. And ended up with pretty severe osteitis pubis and groin inflammation as a result. And that's what we just talked about. There are some freaks of nature that can tolerate that training volume, and there are lads that aren't meant to or aren't able to do the things away from the field in order to do so. So read those 2 books that Ian just recommended at your leisure. Don't take them as a Bible. Yeah. So second last one. What's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months?
What month are we in now? June 20. What was I doing in June 2021? Oh, my wife is a saint. I probably knew that already. Reinforced. Yeah. Get
yourself a good wife if you're in the S&C industry. That can tolerate time away from you by the sounds of things.
She's worse than me. She was working more than I was. So yeah.
Well, then find someone that works more than you do. Then.
Yes, there you go. There it is.
What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
18. What was I doing at 18? I'd say keep going. I think I was on the right track. I think I did all right. Yeah, I think I didn't do too bad.
Drive it on. Okay, perfect, Ian.
Drive it on. Keep taking chances. All right.
Be all right, Dad. Be grand, as they say. Thanks a million for coming on, Ian. Great chat. Loved it.